Hey, what's up? Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Roll Pod, Alabama sports podcast from Bama 247. Second show this week. Going to talk some recruiting. June's kind of a quiet month on the college football calendar, unless you cover recruiting, unless you're part of the recruiting process, unless you're going through the recruiting process. And nobody knows Alabama's recruiting process better than our Brett Greenberg. Brett's here to recap what is sort of a busy time on the schedule. I'd say still relatively busy time on the schedule. Alabama had a pretty big visit weekend last weekend. They've got another one coming up this weekend. We're recording this on Thursday, June 6th. We're going to pick Brett's brain about all of that. Also had a pretty big commitment. We'll take stock of Alabama's 2025 recruiting class. But first, Brett, I got a question for you. You refer to a lot of these recruits, namely the guys from Georgia, as Peach State recruits. A Peach State D lineman, a Peach State linebacker, a Peach State quarterback, a Peach State receiver. I appreciate the Peach State nickname, but why don't we do that with other states?
You know what? You're throwing me off guard here. You're right. You're absolutely right. I think I need to study up on my state nicknames. I've got Yellowhammer State. I've got
the full list. You ready?
Go for it.
So the list of, at least for Alabama's 2025 recruiting class, right? Because they got guys from Texas, Georgia, Alabama, Maryland, California, and New Jersey, right? So Alabama, obviously the Yellowhammer State. That doesn't exactly fit cleanly into a headline. Also, the first Google link that I clicked on, Alabama is also known as the Heart of Dixie and the Camellia State. Probably not as clean as Peach State, but, whatever. Texas, obviously the Lone Star State. What else we got here? Maryland is the Old Line State. I don't know that anybody would get that if you put that in a headline. Georgia also, this is hilarious. Peach State, right, that you refer to often. They're also called the Empire of the South.
That might be a dated slogan.
It was on this Google link. Everything on the internet's true, right? They also, and I have no idea where this came from. I probably should have done more research. Georgia is also referred to as the Goober State. That's a thing. It's
you
a
making
thing.
That, you making that up to me, right?
I will send you the link when we're done recording. But then obviously California, the Golden State, and then New Jersey, the Garden State. So those are the only nicknames there. But every time I see Peach State, I'm like, I get it. That's cool. Where are the other nicknames?
Yeah,
Not that most of them fit cleanly in there, but it was just something I wanted to poke at you at.
Well, I appreciate it. I'm going to study up on that. I'm going to make sure that's one of my things I get done today.
Lone Star State recruit coming in hot. Yeah, which kind of leads us to the big news on Alabama's recruiting front, right? They flipped a pretty big name quarterback, pretty highly touted quarterback, maybe a quarterback that we'd still considered ascending. Keelan Russell, am I pronouncing that right?
Believe it's Keelan. Still working on the exact pronunciation. I just know it's not a Steve from Canada type of thing that we're going to have to deal with this go around.
So Keelan Russell flipped from SMU to Alabama earlier this week. 6'3", 175-pound quarterback, number 7 overall quarterback by 24/7 Sports in the 2025 class. He's the number 8 overall prospect in Texas. Top 40 overall prospect in the 2025 class. He's from Duncanville High School, large class powerhouse in Texas. Even I know who Duncanville is. What more can you tell us about this guy, Brett? This seems like a pretty big deal, and it kind of spurred quite a bit of excitement on our board when the news dropped.
Yeah, I said this on the 247 national show. I don't think you can kind of overstate how big of an addition this is. I know, we've talked about this on the show a couple times. You kind of start, maybe not worry, but kind of, hey, where's Alabama? Where's Kalen DeBoer looking at this 2025 class as far as quarterback position goes? And, you heard some names. Deuce Knight kind of floated around. Julian Lewis kind of floated around. But none of those guys really, clicked, and doesn't seem like they were heavily recruited. And then, you start to hear Keelan Russell, like you said, 4-star quarterback out of Duncanville. Nick Sheridan, Jamarcus Shepard go out to see him during a spring practice, offer him. He sets an official visit. I have a conversation with him, and I've said this a couple times already. I kind of wish I put in a crystal ball right after that, before even his official visit. Just the way he was talking about Alabama, from the history and tradition that Nick Saban built and left for Kalen DeBoer to Nick Sheridan, Jamarcus Shepard, and Kalen DeBoer led offense. Just everything clicked for him immediately. This was one that, I put in a crystal ball, ended up doing in the middle of his visit on Saturday afternoon, felt very comfortable at that, and then ultimately committed 2 days later. And, like I said at the beginning, you needed to get an arm in this class, not only for, just your quarterback room depth, because after Jalen Milroe, that's obviously a big question, but obviously to help you recruiting as well. Him being, like you said, at a big powerhouse, being in the state of Texas, maybe can open some doors for you going forward. But again, I think this is another example of Kalen DeBoer and that staff kind of flexing his muscles. This thing happened very quickly. The family got on board, and it was just another big win for this staff, and he seems to be totally locked in. No other official visits going forward, so a huge win.
Yeah, based on what you've seen and some of the experts that you've talked to, what are some of this guy's strengths? Like, what is Alabama getting in this guy? Not to give away everything of the story that's behind the paywall. Go check out Bama 247. But what are some of the key highlights?
Yeah, I think I really want to start with off the field, just mentally talking to him. He wants to come in and start, obviously, but he's going to go about it the right way. You talk to the trainer, and just keep bringing up Duncanville, but that is kind of a college program, so to speak. I mean, everybody in the city goes there on Friday. Everybody knows your name. You're competing against the best of the best every week, and practice every week. And I was told, he quickly commanded the respect of his teammates when he came in as a freshman to replace somebody, and then took them to 2 straight state championships. And that's not easy. I mean, you've got juniors and seniors going to Texas, Alabama, everywhere, and you've got a freshman coming in to play quarterback. So that's in itself, I think, extremely impressive. And then, you look at his on-field production. Like I said, he took his team to 2 straight state championships, 70% career completion percentage, I believe, 60 total touchdowns, I believe 12 interceptions. Andrew Ivins was talking about that. He keeps coming back to that passing percentage and completion percentage. I mean, that can't really be ignored. And again, you're playing against very, very good competition. And one thing I did ask the trainer, I thought, was a little bit interesting is he a pass first? Does he run? Because I've watched this film, he runs a little bit too, but he knows his arm strength, and he wants to use that arm strength. He wants to throw the ball 60, 70 yards down the field, but he knows he can get out and run as well. I think he has 12 combined touchdowns through the ground through his first 2 years.
So an impressive, versatile athlete that can bring a lot to an offense. And then you look at, the Alabama side of things. They've got, Kalen DeBoer's in tow now. He's got a real strong history of, developing quarterbacks. Nick Sheridan's here. There's a ton of people that are really high on him as the offensive coordinator. 2 really good offensive minds who have worked together for many, many years. What were the conversations like with Russell when you're talking to him about, future development, getting to work with DeBoer and Sheridan, and what were some of those conversations like? What did he tell you?
Yeah, you brought up a little bit right there, but it's exactly that. Michael Penix continues to get brought up, even with wide receivers as well. Just the way that he was developed from Indiana and Nick Sheridan, oddly enough, then, goes to Washington with DeBoer. He keeps getting brought up. And, Keelan Russell talked about that. And, one thing I found interesting too is talking to analysts is they say every time you see Keelan, he gets better. So you're kind of pairing a developmental quarterback with a coach who has proven to develop quarterbacks. So it's like almost a perfect marriage. Andrew Ivins talked about as well on the 247 show, just how the open concept, the open backfield is going to really suit him well. That's what he runs in high school. So again, I think it's just a perfect fit. And one thing I did wanted to add, I had a great conversation with him after the weekend, and he talked about going into the trip, having an opportunity to talk with Jalen Milroe, obviously a fellow Texas native quarterback, played at a big time high school as well, committed to Texas, decommitted, went to Alabama, obviously. I thought that was very interesting. He was able to, kind of pick his brain. And, I asked him, was it more about, what is this offense like? What are these coaches like? And he was like, no, it was really about his adversity, because he was already so comfortable with these coaches. He didn't need to hear from anybody else. It was just, what is this adversity you went through? He talked about how he got benched in the South Florida game and came back and, is now is probably the starter, could be a Heisman favorite. So I thought that was very interesting and, showed him a lot as well. So again, it sounded like a broken record, but this staff knocked it out of the park with him and wrapped him up fairly quickly.
6'3", 175 pounds. This dude's kind of skinny. But the 6'3" part of it leads me to believe that this is a frame that he's going to be able to put muscle on? Is this one of those things that he's kind of focused on as he heads into, what'll be his senior year? Is this something where it's like he's excited to get in the weight room with David Ballou? Like, have you kind of talked about what he wants to do over the next year as he gets ready to join the program?
Yeah, I haven't exactly talked specifics like weight or anything like that. But one thing, again, I talk about with the mentals, like he's going to come in, he wants to, compete for a starting job. He's going to do everything he needs to do to best prepare himself to be in the best position when he comes in, I believe, as an early enrollee next December. So I think, he has it, what it takes. And, you look at 175, but he's got a while to go. And then, you look at 6'3", and I think, talked about it again, but you look at, he kind of fits that Kalen DeBoer mold. Obviously, you bring in Austin Mack at 6'4", listed at 6'4", I believe it is. So he kind of just seems like kind of the perfect match. It was very clear that Keelan Russell was going to be the only guy on this board, and they wanted him. They had to have him, and they got him.
Yeah. So before we jump into kind of the state of Alabama's 2025 class now, you mentioned that just, getting your quarterback this early in the cycle helps with recruiting the rest of the class. Who could be next?
Yeah, it's tough to say exactly who's next, just because right now, just with the flurry of official visits, a lot of these guys coming off the first weekend obviously are extremely high on school. So it's very tough to get a very good gauge. I will say, though, like a guy that Tom Lloyd keeps talking to me about and keeps bringing up nationally as well as Derek Meadows, a top 247 receiver out of Las Vegas, Bishop Gorman. He continues to say that Alabama has a real shot here. And I think, guys like Keelan Russell maybe attracts a guy like Derek Meadows a little bit more. Hey, I have this quarterback in my class. A guy that's kind of taken over the news cycle a lot is five-star receiver DeCorian Moore, who actually plays at Duncanville with Keelan Russell. Obviously, you've got to check that out. I believe he told Mike Roach, Mike Roach checked in on him just to see what was going on. And he said, hey, I'm, thinking about maybe a visit, not saying that's going to happen, not saying Alabama is interested or there is serious interest there. But I think that's just an example of what Keelan Russell is going to be able to do, open doors recruiting wise, maybe that weren't open a week ago.
Yeah. Well, and then Duncanville's quarterback is, that's a high profile star power type position when it comes to high school football in Texas. So when the Duncanville quarterback chooses Alabama, right, that's going to turn some heads, right? Not that Alabama really ever had an issue recruiting Texas, especially under Saban, but when the new staff is able to come in and land a guy like that with those type of credentials and that type of production, kind of like you hinted at, like going to open a lot more doors. A lot more people are going to be like, oh, what's going on over there in Tuscaloosa, right? So Absolutely. I think in many ways, that's just as big a win as getting this type of talent in the room as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And to your point right there too, not like Alabama had any trouble with recruiting anywhere in the country, but as you started the show, you got New Jersey, California, Texas, Georgia, so in Alabama. So they're, hitting all the main spots. They've got a lot of top prospects in Kansas, a couple of people in Florida. So, the staff's kind of hitting all spots as of right now.
You mentioned it. There are, 6 different states represented in Alabama's 2025 class right now. 11 total commitments, currently ranked number 8 overall by 247 Sports. 4 top 100 guys. I've got the list pulled up right here. I'm curious your thoughts, though, Brett, as you look at this class as it stands right now in early June. What are some thoughts that you have? What's the overall vibe check? How are you feeling about the way this class is coming together?
Yeah, I think we talked about it the last time. It may have made the headline, linebackers. A lot of linebackers in this class. I know you kind of look at it, but a lot of versatility. One thing I will say is, I had a conversation with Daryl Johnson, who's actually expected to be here this weekend for an official visit, which we'll talk about a little bit later in the show, but he's 100% committed. He told me he's excited to get back on campus as much as possible and excited to recruit as many people as possible as well. But, you look at the class, I think it's a good start. Andrew Ivins and Cooper Patagna were talking about it as well. They were talking about this looks like a Nick Saban class. You look at a Luke Metz, who I believe is the lowest ranked commit, graded at 88. If that's where you're at, I think if that's your floor right now, I think you're at a very good spot. They talked about, Abdul Sanders listed at a 3-star, kind of flirting him in the top 247. I know a lot of Alabama fans pay attention to these stars. But again, I think it's a very good start. And, the kind of the theme of this class is kind of two-way guys, or very versatile guys. A lot of these guys play both ways. And in high school, a lot of these targets, like Todd Robinson, for example, Valdosta, Georgia, he took an official visit. He plays both ways. They like him at DB. Derek Smith, he plays wide receiver. He's going to probably play safety for Alabama. So it's just a lot of versatile guys. I think, if you kind of had to nitpick it, maybe get a couple wide receivers in the fold, maybe a couple more edge rushers. But again, like we talked about, that could come. Keelan Russell can open the door. And, there's certainly a lot of more guys in the trenches and receivers set to visit here in a couple weeks.
I'm curious too, and maybe this is more of like a 2026, 2027 type question. Side note, it's kind of weird that we're talking about 2026 and 2027 recruits. But that's part of the job, right? Like you forecasting into the future, getting the vibe check on what these guys are thinking and feeling and hearing. Is there like a sense among those guys, maybe not so much 2025, although I'm sure that there's a few of those players that are going to kind of wait until the fall before they make some decisions, but especially 2026 and 2027 guys who have a lot of interest in Alabama. Is there like a sense of like, let's see what this looks like first before we decide to, commit, or maybe you've taken an official visit or really start to get in-depth conversation with the coaching staff?
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. And I don't blame these kids. Quite frankly, like you said it right there, the 2025 kids, I think some of them also want to pay some close attention to the product on the field. A lot of conversations I have with people around the industry, and I said, it's a, very nice start. Like, DeBoer's not going to fall off, things like that. And I agree with them, but it's also the next big test is the on-field production and see how that can translate. If you can have that offense continue to be one of the best in the country, maybe Ryan Williams contributes, a Caleb Odom who's been talked about so highly is contributing. You open doors for a lot more recruits down the road. So it's going to be very important. But yeah, like you said, 2026, 2027, a lot of these conversations, of course, the interest level is very high. They want to, continue to be in Tuscaloosa, but a lot of them has told me as well, they want to come to games, see how the on-field production is. And one guy I think, we wanted to hit on here, I don't know if it's a little bit too early, but Justice Fitzpatrick, for example, obviously the little brother of Alabama legend, maybe one of the best Alabama players of all time. Some will tell you he's your favorite. Justice Fitzpatrick, #1 cornerback in 2026, added an offer earlier this week. Obviously had an offer from Nick Saban and staff, got this long-awaited offer from Colin Hitchler over the week. He's set to be at Alabama next week, his first summer visit, or his first visit of the summer, excuse me. So that's a big one. He talked to me exactly about that, just, wanting to see how this team is going to perform.
You're talking about nitpicking the 2025 class, right? Like where are the receivers, where are the edge rushers? Receivers should probably have a lot more confidence than maybe the edge rushers, just because you've got Jamarcus Shepard here, you've got Nick Sheridan there, you've got Kalen DeBoer there. There's a clear track record of wide receiver development and production and usage in that type of offense. But if I'm an edge rusher, I kind of understand the hesitancy maybe, because under Saban, right, like Dallas Turner, Will Anderson, Drew Sanders for a year, like there's a documented history there under Saban of just guys coming in and this is your role. You're going to be the outside linebacker. You're going to chase after the quarterback. You're going to sometimes maybe, drop back, but you're going to play a huge role on the defense. There is that role in Kane Womack's defense, but even us, like covering the team day to day, we're kind of curious to see what that Wolf position entails. Like what are they going to do? What's going to be asked of them? Is it going to be the same responsibilities that they had under Saban, or are they going to be different in Womack's 4-2-5 swarm defense? Like, so if I'm an edge rusher, like how am I going to be used? What's the product look like on the field? Is that something I want to go do in Womack's defense, or do I maybe want to look elsewhere for a more traditional 3-4 type defense and play that role? I get it. We're curious what it's going to look like. So I imagine the recruits, who probably know a little bit more about X's and O's than we do, are like, okay, like what's, if I come here, what's it going to look like? So talking about picking nits here, like I get it. Totally get it.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing, just sticking on the defense here, looking at kind of the secondary, a lot of conversations I have there they're just very excited again to see how it works. Obviously on paper, the 4-2-5, the extra defensive back on the field is very appealing to a lot of these guys, not only for the versatility and just the opportunity to play earlier, but they're still excited to see and anxious to see how exactly these guys are used.
You alluded to it as well. Pretty big set of weekends here, especially last weekend and this upcoming weekend when it comes to visits for Alabama. June is kind of the opportunity for these recruits to get on campus, meet with the coaches, take the official visits, and it's a little bit quieter than it would be in the fall, right? So then maybe they get a feel of Tuscaloosa a little bit better. Big visit weekend last weekend. You got to talk to a handful of names that were both on that visit and that will also be on this upcoming visit weekend. Maybe we can start with how last weekend's visit weekend went. Who were some of the big names? What were some of the big takeaways? What'd you learn from that group of visitors?
Yeah, I think, for starters, and I've talked about it on the board too, and leading up to this, aside from Keelan, after talking to him, I didn't expect any commitments. Again, a lot of these guys are coming back. These are their first visits before they take 3 or 4 more this June. They're still developing relationships with coaches. But what I was told, a lot of these guys had very good trips, some, including 5-star offensive tackle Ty Haywood out of Denton, Texas. Again, we're hitting on Texas again, but he maybe, kind of in talking to him, maybe didn't expect to enjoy the trip as much as he thought he would, or he ended up having. This is a guy who grew up in Mississippi, has grown up since he was 5 years old watching Alabama. His mother's an Alabama fan. He's had a good relationship with Coach Cap from the brief Baylor stint. That was, a recruitment that, I've kind of been hinting at a little bit, that kind of quietly Alabama's been doing a really, really good job there. He told me after this trip, which was actually, oddly enough, his first time in Tuscaloosa, there's a new spark in the Crimson Tide. Again, he's going to be taking a lot more visits, but it seems like the Alabama staff did a really good job with him there. And then, a pair of modern day guys out west in California. You talk about hitting on all sides of the country, continuing the pipelines and things like that. It seems like the staff has positioned himself well again with a guy like Chuck McDonald, a 4-star cornerback who took his first ever trip. He's got obviously many connections on staff with on the roster with freshman Xavier Brown, who he's talked about before, and how they hung out the whole trip. And that was a good time. And then another guy is Jordan Davison, who's a top 247 running back, who Alabama, since his freshman year, has been heavily recruiting him with Nick Saban. And then, him and Coach Gillespie have obviously had a great relationship that has continued to be a very, very good relationship. And then, one other guy this weekend I had a good relationship or a good conversation with is Todd Robinson. Talked about him a little bit in the show. He's seems to be very, very high on Alabama. He's out of Valdosta, Georgia. So anytime he's from the Peach State, it's going to be tough to it's going to be tough to get him out of the Georgia, get him away from Kirby Smart and the Georgia Bulldogs. But I think he seriously is considering Alabama. I think he did well. You look ahead to next week and the coming weeks. It's kind of a who's who each weekend. Alabama's staff has clearly done a very good job with a lot of these guys to get them on campus. I think those are wins in itself. One guy, I'm circling that had a good relationship yesterday, or I keep saying relationship, conversation with yesterday, is Dawson Merritt, who's that top Wolf position that we talked about. He's that Wolf target out of Kansas, number 6 linebacker in the country. He's down in Nebraska and Alabama, has been for some time. Alabama was going to be getting the last official visit this weekend. He told me, at the end of the call, he says it's truly 50-50. He has very good relationships with Courtney Morgan and Kalen DeBoer. He said multiple times that was kind of his first big offer from Washington. It's actually kind of a unique relationship. His dad is the defensive backs coach for the Kansas City Chiefs.
Hey,
David Merritt, and he actually coached with Matt Rule, I believe, with the Giants. So that's the connection there to Nebraska. It's also a little bit closer to Kansas City with his father, having to be busy on Sundays, things like that. I mean, travel's tough either way, but that's something to kind of note there as well. But, I truly have the sense that Alabama's in a good spot here. I think, Nebraska has been doing a really good job as well, but I think another trip in Alabama could help their chances. Asked him as well, kind of decision timeline. The plan was June. He told me he truly does not know yet. Kind of poked him pride a little bit. I said, this staff you think could really get you shut down this weekend? He said, I don't. They could, but no decision will be made until I have a couple nights to sleep on it. So I'm going to be continuing to monitor that, but that's certainly one to circle next for this following weekend. He'll arrive tomorrow, Friday.
Wanted to pick your brain a little bit more about this Brock Harris character. This seems like one of the big tight end names to know in the 2026 class, right? So this is a kid that's probably going to, spend the fall taking his visits, want to see what the product on the field looks like. And maybe he intrigues me a little bit because you look at what DeBoer has been able to do with his offenses at previous stops, right? Indiana, Fresno, Washington. There has been a go-to tight end in each one of those offenses. Like it's more of a traditional role. I know that we talked a ton about tight ends when Tommy Rees was here and 2 tight end sets and getting on the field and getting those opportunities. DeBoer tends to use his tight ends in a little bit more traditional role, right? There's, they're heavily used in the passing game. They're obviously used when it comes to run blocking and, various types of things. Have you had preliminary conversations with Harris about, how he feels about DeBoer's offense, about how he could be used, how he wants to be used at the next level? This guy seems to have the stuff.
Yeah, I mean, 6'6", 238 pounds, I believe he's listed at. I mean, take him now. But, it's exactly what you said, Harris included, but every tight end I talk to, prospect, is like, hey, I want to be a complete tight end. They want to be able to, pass block and run block, but they also want to get out wide and, go vertical. And that's been proven in a Kalen DeBoer and a Nick Sheridan. Brian Ellison did that at Georgia Southern as well. So that continues to be brought up. I'm not just a 3-down, or 3-down tight end. I want to be used. And that continues to be proven over and over again. And they talk about that all the time. But yeah, Brock Harris, he's telling me, he was talking with Nick Sheridan and Brian Ellis just about how, hey, obviously Alabama had a lot of success here. They've the most success of any other school. But it wouldn't be wrong or to say, maybe the tight end production was lacking a little bit. And
we can say that it wasn't quite what we thought it was going to be.
Yeah. And even beyond Tommy Rees here, there wasn't a lot. I mean, you've got OJ Howard and a couple other guys, but beyond that, there wasn't a lot of, marquee names or a Brock Bowers type of guy. Of course, Brock Bowers is maybe one of one, but I think they've told a lot of these tight ends, hey, like just watch this year. Like, we are getting our tight ends involved, and that seems to be getting a lot of guys excited. And again, I keep bringing up Caleb Odom, but that keeps being brought up in conversations as well a lot of these guys. Some of these guys do want to play receiver, but so there's just that versatility there, and I think that willingness from the staff to listen and say, hey, what do you want to do? But also, hey, here's what we think you should do, type of thing. So again, that versatility and that conversation, that comfort with these tight ends, I think is going to pay off. And again, if you see CJ Dippre and Oots and all those guys, Ty Haywood be productive this year, you can't ignore it.
Another interview that you did earlier this week, you alluded to him earlier, Justice Fitzpatrick, the younger brother of Minkah Fitzpatrick. Minkah, all-time Alabama favorite, like widely regarded as, one of the best safeties to ever come through here. He's now an all-pro safety with Pittsburgh. Justice is the number 1 cornerback, again, 2026 class. So this is a guy that maybe kind of wants to see what does Kane Womack's defense look like? How do the corners play? What's being asked of them? What did you get out of that conversation with Justice? And do you finally feel old like the rest of us when some of these younger siblings and, like little Dre in the last recruiting class come through and it's like, oh my goodness, like there's another one? This is crazy.
Yeah, that's exactly what my thought process was. Cause the whole Dre Kirkpatrick thing, I'm like kind of too young for that. Like, I understand, but this one, I'm like, okay, hold on. Like, this is crazy. And then, you talk to him and he's like, yeah, I grew up there when I was 8, 9, 10. I remember being around Tuscaloosa, and he sends me pictures, which I've got on Bama 247 of him, like, with Mika at his draft day, and, he's little, and then him at Tuscaloosa after A day and after games, things like that. And he's little. So that certainly made me feel very, very old. But this kid, he, first of all, obviously he's number 1 quarterback in the country. He seems to have taken a lot of traits from his older brother, and in talking to
learned a thing or two, right?
Right. And then talking to him too, and I've never directly spoke with Mika, but in interviews and things like that, they're cut from the same cloth. Very respectful, very driven, very focused, know what they're looking for. And again, I talked about earlier in the show, but he goes, yeah, me and Coach Hitchler, we have a good relationship right now. We've talked, and I like that Kane Womack defense, but I want to see what that looks like. And then again, he talked about, he said, hey, I'm a big guy. Me and Coach Hitch talked about how I can play corner, I can play nickel, I can play safety. I want that versatility. So obviously that 4-2-5 is very appealing to me. And then, one thing that I thought was pretty cool too is, he said he and his family, they still have connections in Tuscaloosa, which I thought was, very cool. It's truly even with the coaching change, it's truly a family there. And, these pros are welcome back. And that was very cool to see. And, I asked him, he said, every team, like you said, 2026, it's an even playing field. He's, number one cornerback. He's going to be able to pick anywhere in the country he wants to go. But he, again, he said one thing that Alabama has is, I grew up there. I'm comfortable there. I know where everything is. So, Alabama should have a shot with obviously the younger brother of a absolute legend.
Another interview that you did this week. You did a lot of interviews, not just this week, but over the past couple weeks. But like I said on the last show, I was gone last week, so there's a lot of catching up that I'm doing this week just to kind of get back on the same page.
Yes, sir.
Anthony Jones, 4-star edge, number one edge nationally. Again, 2026 guy, so not this year, but perhaps next year. One of those guys that probably wants to wait and see how this Kane Womack defense goes. But he's an in-state guy. You look at this 2025 class, Alabama's done a very good job of, nabbing some of these in-state guys. How big of a priority does he feel like as an in-state guy who also happens to be one of the best at his position nationally, widely regarded as the best at his position nationally, at least right now? How much does, a lot of the Alabama guys in the 2025 class, how much has that impacted his decision? What'd you learn from your conversation with Anthony Jones?
Yeah, I think, Alabama has always been a top school for him. Alabama has recruited him since he was a freshman. He's been one of the best players in the country since he was a freshman over at St. Paul's over in Mobile. And I think one thing that's, interesting and pretty cool is just with him being in Mobile and growing up, he was kind of around South Alabama when Kane Womack was there. So they have that relationship, which I think is a very good thing. Obviously, that's built in. He's talked about that before. Alabama got the first summer visit. I believe it was a week ago. Him and Christian Robinson hit it off, which was nice to see. I will say Tom Lloyd did put in a crystal ball for him. He put a couple crystal balls in yesterday. He put it in for Auburn. That is just the general sense right now. We are a very long way away. I will say, Auburn seems to be in a good spot too. I think this is going to be a classic Alabama-Auburn battle, and one that each school, I'm just going to go ahead and say it, has to have, but you got to get this guy. This is a very big in-state win type, and he seems to be very high on Alabama, very high on Auburn, and this should be a good recruitment to follow for a while. And again, like you said, he doesn't seem to be in any rush to make a commitment. He seems to be enjoying his recruitment, so this will be one to follow for sure.
I don't know how long he wants to wait, but if he wants to go to both Iron Bowls for his official visit to both schools, he's got the time to wait for that if he wants to drag it out and it's just these two schools, right? Like what's it like in Tuscaloosa? What's it like at Auburn next year, right? Or maybe he was there this past season and saw how crazy that atmosphere in that game ultimately went.
They'll do if it's a tiebreaker, he'll go to the SEC championship when Alabama Auburn play each other, or the second round of the playoff, or whatever it may be.
There's a lot of opportunities there for him to see both Alabama and Auburn. So that'll be fun to monitor, I think, over the next year and a half or so. You alluded to it too. Wanted to kind of wrap up here. Big visit weekend coming up this weekend for Alabama. You mentioned Dawson Merritt. You've mentioned Darrell Johnson, Duke, already an Alabama commit. Jaden Harmon, another Alabama commit. Both those guys out of Georgia. What are some other big names that you're going to be keeping an eye on, and what's maybe the overall feel coming into this visit weekend, June 7th through the 9th?
Yeah, there's one guy that actually confirmed recently is Nick Townsend, 4-star, listed as an athlete. I believe he, getting recruited as a tight end out of Houston, Texas. This is a guy that he's quietly had Alabama very high on his board. From what I've been told by multiple people, this is a guy that I think is very interested again in that tight end production and the versatility. And, if you have a minute, go watch his tape. He plays in a very high classification. And I think if he wanted to play linebacker in college at an SEC school, he could. He's 6'3", got that
240.
Yeah, he is a just absolute two-way freak. Just kind of fits the mold of what Alabama's looking for. Another guy that I'm paying attention to is Michael Carroll, big-time Pennsylvania offensive lineman, will be in for his official visit. Was in Tuscaloosa for a day. Seemed to have Alabama very high on his list, battling the likes of Michigan and Penn State, which he'll be visiting the following 2 weekends in that order, I believe. So that should be a battle with the Big Tens. But that relationship with Coach Cap seems to be going a long way. originally had Grayson Littleton set to visit and Bo Jackson set to visit. Bo Jackson ultimately committed to Ohio State this week. Grayson Littleton ultimately committed to Clemson yesterday. So they will not be there anymore. Mal Waldrop will be in town, in-state legacy guy. His father played at Alabama. I believe it was in March. He replaced Auburn with Alabama to get his official visit. So Alabama seems to be doing a pretty good job there and can, continue to make him feel more at home, which he's talked about. He said he can't count how many times he's been at Alabama, since he was a little kid. And then another guy, I won't give the full list, but another running back is Shakai Mills-Knight out of Baylor School in Chattanooga, former high school teammate of Amari Jefferson. He was in Miami last weekend. It'll be one to follow. Just, I've got obviously you've got Anthony Rogers in the fold, but it'll be interesting to see what running back Alabama gets next. I think, they would like to add one more. Obviously you've got Jordan Davidson, but like I said, Bo Jackson, is off the board. A.K. Deere, who Alabama's still talking to, is committed to Ole Miss. So I think Alabama would like to add another running back. So that's a guy I'm following. And a couple more guys, and I'm going to have a full preview tomorrow on Friday and continued coverage throughout the weekend and conversations with guys after the week. Probably updates coming in Sunday afternoon, Sunday night.
Recruiting never sleeps, man, even in the month of June, where everything else on the college sports calendar is quiet, which means Brett Greenberg doesn't sleep either.
Exactly.
Brett, I appreciate you coming on the show and catching us up on all things Alabama recruiting.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Cody. Thanks, guys.
That's all we've got today, guys. We'll be back probably next week. I'm going to try to get at least one show a week through this month, at least one show a week to get us all the way up to SEC Media Days, which are next month in July, mid-July, right? So, we're going to kind of try and go on that 1 to 2 show per week schedule up through then. In the meantime, though, be sure to rate and review the show wherever you listen to your podcast, Apple, Stitcher, Spotify, even our Bama 247 YouTube page. Subscribe to Bama 247 and 247 Sports to get all of Brett's recruiting intel and information. We're running a special 60% off an annual VIP membership. You got to take advantage of that, especially if you're an Alabama fan. As always, we appreciate you guys for listening, and we will talk to you all again soon.
See you guys.